Weeds are probably one of the most important sources of loss of production in crops and in pasture in Tasmania today. Fortunately, there are many selective herbicides, and most weed problems in crops can be handled satisfactorily. To get the best from these herbicides, however, it is absolutely essential that they be applied at the correct application rate and that the application be spread uniformly over the paddock. To do this, the spraying machine must be properly calibrated. If the application is too high, there is a risk of crop damage, for today, with the difficult problems of weeds being encountered, many herbicides are being used at or very close to their safety limit. In addition, herbicides are now extremely expensive, and the use of excessively high rates will cause quite a significant increase in the cost of weed control with no additional benefit. On the other hand, if the application rate is too low, the weeds will not be controlled satisfactorily, and the whole of the money spent on the material and on its application will be wasted. This is a typical tractor-mounted boom sprayer and is used at the Cressy Research Farm. The parts of the sprayer are the spray tank, in this case a plastic unit, the pump, a PTO-driven twin-piston diaphragm pump. This is the pulsation chamber, a large line filter, main on-off cock, pressure regulator and pressure gauge, and the output line to the booms. Before the beginning of the spraying season, equipment should be checked over to make sure that everything is in good working order and that any necessary repairs or replacements can be carried out. The pump is the most important part of the machine and should be given a careful examination. The gear pump is a simple machine and maintenance is quite easy. Items to be checked are the condition of the gears themselves. It should be made certain that there are no scores or nicks on the gears. This will cause the machine to lose pressure. And that the inside of the housing again is free of any scores. Routine servicing consists of making sure that the machine is adequately greased. The grease cups should be filled and turned down after every 4 or 5 hours to make sure that there is adequate grease in the bearings. The second type of pump commonly found in spraying machines is the diaphragm pump. Before the season, the valves in this type of machine should be inspected, particularly to make sure that the springs are in working order and that the seals are intact. The diaphragm itself should be checked over for cracks or fractures, and the daily maintenance consists of greasing at the grease nipple which lubricates the shaft of the machine. The third type of pump is the piston pump. This is used in many spraying machines. There should be no scratches or marks down the cylinder or the machine will lose pressure. And the ring on the piston should be checked to make sure that it's not cracked or broken. The valve should be checked to make sure that the spring itself is not damaged. This is a fault which occurs quite often with this type of machine, that the valve itself is not damaged and that the valve seat is in a satisfactory condition. Maintenance on a day-to-day basis consists of greasing the grease nipples every 4 or 5 hours of spraying. The next thing to check at the beginning of the season is the condition of the nozzles. There are many different makes of nozzle, but this is typical. Most of them would be very similar. Has 4 parts: body, cap, the filter, which makes sure that there's no rubbish gets into the tip, and the tip itself. Now, the tips are numbered, and this number indicates the amount of spray that the tip puts through. The thing to check with the tip is to make sure that it's not damaged at all, that the hole through the tip is clean and not obstructed. If there is any obstruction, it should be cleaned out with pressure jet of water or with a soft brush. Never use a hard metal object like a pin. This will only damage the tip. The other thing to be careful with the sprayer is to make sure that all the tips on the boom are the same size, otherwise the output will be uneven. The filter should be kept clean. There are a range of different size filters available, and the filter chosen should be in accordance with the manufacturer's directions for the tip being used. This particular filter incorporates what's called a check valve. This is a little spring-loaded ball valve which shuts off the spray as soon as the pump stops pumping. This prevents dripping and loss of spray from the boom. Check that the spring is in good working order and that the valve moves freely in the seat. On the boom, the nozzles should be slightly offset to ensure that the spray from one nozzle doesn't hit against the spray from the adjacent nozzle and cause an interference in the smoothness of the pattern between the two. Once it's been set by hand, the tip is just locked into position by tightening up the cap. At the beginning of each season, the output from each nozzle should be checked to make sure that all the nozzles are putting out the same quantity of liquid. This is done by running the machine, collecting the output from each nozzle in turn for, say, 1 minute, and measuring the amount of liquid collected. Any nozzle which has an output 10% more or less than the mean should be replaced. Before each day's spraying, the pump should be checked and greased. The hose clip should be checked to make sure there's no leaks. The line filter should be cleaned, and 3 or 4 of the nozzle filters should be inspected to see if there's any accumulation of material. If the nozzle filters are getting clogged up, then the whole lot should be taken off and cleaned out properly. Spraying machines are expensive items, costing several $1,000s these days. If looked after properly, they will have a life of 15 to 20 years. Due attention to routine servicing and replacement of defective items, cleaning out after use, and storage under cover over winter is a good investment. The 3 factors which affect the output of the spraying machine are the ground speed, the boom pressure, and the size of the nozzle. Before starting an operation, the person carrying out the spraying should decide what is the best speed for the conditions under which he is going to work, and to stick to that speed throughout the whole of the operation. The spraying machine should, of course, be calibrated at this speed. The faster a sprayer goes, the less the output. The lower the ground speed, the higher the application rate, and vice versa. If it travels too slowly, the whole operation takes far too much time. If a machine is driven too quickly, it can become difficult and even dangerous to handle. The second factor which affects the output of the machine is the boom pressure. An increase in boom pressure increases the throughput from the nozzles and increases the application rate of the sprayer. The adjustment can be made only within a very limited range, however, since if the pressure is too low, the pattern of the nozzle breaks down and the spray is no longer uniform. On the other hand, if the pressure is increased too much, a mass of fine droplets which will result in drift are produced. The third factor which affects the output of the spraying machine is the size of the tip in the nozzle. There are a range of different sizes available. The smaller the hole, the smaller the output. The larger the hole, the larger the output. The manufacturer's catalogues indicate the output of the different size of nozzle for different pressures and for different sprayer speeds. The object in calibrating a spraying machine is not to set it to give a precise output. Calibration is carried out to measure precisely what output the sprayer is giving. Once this is known, then the amount of herbicide which has to be mixed with the amount of water in the spray tank is easily calculated. The way in which a sprayer can be calibrated is simple. First of all, the tank is 3 parts filled and the pump run for a few minutes to ensure that all lines are full and that all nozzles are operating correctly. The pump is then stopped and the level of water in the tank measured. This can either be done by marking the outside of the tank, if it's a translucent plastic type of tank, or by marking a dipstick. The place where this measurement is taken is marked. The sprayer is now run over a measured distance. It is then returned to the place where the level of the water was originally marked and set in exactly the same position. The amount of water required to return the level of water in the sprayer tank to the original mark is now measured. You now have the amount of water required to spray a measured area. The calibration being demonstrated is carried out with water. Hence, the operator is not wearing the protective clothing he would do if actually carrying out a spraying operation. To find the area sprayed during the test run, multiply the width of the boom by the length of the test strip. In this example, the width of the boom is 10 meters, the length of the test run is 200 meters, so the area sprayed is 2,000 square meters. As herbicide application rates are given in terms of litres or kilograms of chemical per hectare, it is necessary to find the proportion of a hectare that was sprayed during the test run. This is done by dividing the area sprayed by 10,000, that is the number of square metres in a hectare. In this example, 1/5 of a hectare has been sprayed. Once the proportion of a hectare that has been sprayed is known, it is simple to calculate the machine's output per hectare. The machine's output over the test strip has been measured. If the machine sprayed 20 litres of liquid over 1/5 of a hectare, its output per hectare will be 5 times that is 100 litres per hectare. Once the output of the sprayer is known, it is simple to determine the amount of water with which the herbicide should be diluted to ensure correct application. If the recommended rate of application is 2 kilograms per hectare, put some water into the tank, add the 2 kilograms of herbicide, and continue filling with water to the 100-litre mark. To spray 5 hectares, merely multiply both amounts by 5 to get the correct quantity. In this example, we would first place 10 kilograms of herbicide in the tank and then fill with water to the 500-litre mark. To get the spray distributed uniformly across the width of the boom, it's most important that the height of the boom is correct above the ground. This particular machine is a sprayer used for research purposes and will demonstrate the effect using a piece of equipment called a patinator. The output from the spray nozzles falls on the patinator, is caught in the troughs and collected in the tubes. The water level in the tube indicates the amount of spray being deposited across the width of the boom. First of all, we'll demonstrate the machine with the boom set at the correct height above the ground, and you'll see that the output is uniform across the whole width of the boom. As you can see, the output with the boom set at the correct height is uniform across the whole width with very little variation at all. Now we'll show what happens when the boom is set too low. This time there has been far too much spray applied immediately underneath the nozzle and practically nothing in between. This is going to result in strips across the paddock where no weeds have been controlled, and quite likely adjacent strips where the crop has been damaged through too high an application. Now we'll take the boom too high and show what effect that has. With the boom set too high, again, the distribution across the width of the boom has been uneven. This time, there has been more spray deposited between the nozzles and less spray immediately underneath the nozzle. The error this time is not as serious as it was with the boom set too low, but it is something which should be avoided. If the boom is progressively raised, then when it reaches twice the normal height, the application again is reasonably uniform across the width. With tall growing plants, for example thistles, it may be an advantage to use a boom at twice this height. A tall growing plant may in fact come up between the nozzles and not be sprayed adequately when the boom is set at the correct height for application to a low growing plant or crop. Farmers wouldn't normally have access to a patinator, but a simple method of checking the correct boom height can be carried out along a hot bitumen road. If the boom is at the correct height, the water will evaporate off uniformly. If the boom is too high or too low, stripes will be left underneath the nozzles or between them. At the end of each day's spraying, the machine should be emptied and cleaned. It is not recommended that spray be saved from one day and used on another day. The tank should be emptied and washed out with clean water. It should then be half filled and let run for a few minutes with the recirculation on, and then water should be sprayed out to clean out the nozzles. If it is intended to use a different spray or to spray a different crop, then a more thorough cleaning process, as recommended in the Department of Agriculture's leaflet on sprayer calibration, should be used.